Okay, welcome to the webinar sponsored by Education Dynamics. My name is Eric McGee. I am the Director of Marketing for Education Dynamics, and we've got a great presentation for you today. Lots of good information and insights about trends and strategies that you can use to hopefully better understand what's happening right now in digital marketing and higher education and how you can improve what you're currently doing or think about some new options or opportunities for improvements. As I said, my name is Eric McGee. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications. If you have any needs, if there's anything that I can help you with, certainly reach out to me. We've got Jana Weary with us. She's the Senior Director of Marketing at JMH Consulting, which is a division of Education Dynamics. Jana has over 15 years experience in higher ed marketing. She has managed hundreds of digital marketing campaigns and is really an expert at the various platforms and the strategies that we employ in generating leads. So she'll be presenting to us today, talking about the trends that she's seeing and the strategies that we're employing to take advantage of these opportunities. So really quickly about Education Dynamics. We are a full service solution for your higher education recruitment and retention needs. So anything from marketing research all the way up through new student acquisition and even retention, we can certainly help you with that. We've got everything from marketing services, we've got a dedicated contact center and inquiry management and generation and retention campaign strategies as well. A little bit about what makes us different. We are exclusively higher education, and we are the leaders in higher education lead generation and nurturing. We provide transparency to our partnerships. We look at it as a partnership and allow you to see what's happening with your leads or prospective leads with your campaigns. And we've got a dedicated contact center that's located in Florida that can help you manage those acquisitions and leads as well. So if you're interested in more information, certainly feel free to reach out to us. We would love to have a conversation with you. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jana.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and I appreciate the introduction. I'm excited to be here today talking with you guys about what is new now and next in higher ed marketing. We spend a lot of time on digital marketing. It takes up a significant portion of our time and resources, and for good reason. Digital campaigns give us the ability to track ROI and visualize the direct impact our campaigns have on program enrollments. Unfortunately, our digital tools and techniques are ever evolving, and it can be difficult to keep up. So this is actually a presentation that we've been giving now every year for the past several years to help us all as marketers in the higher ed space keep up with what's changing, what's evolving. And that's why I'm here today. So I'd like to share a handful of marketing trends and updates that are particularly relevant to us in the higher ed space. Whether you're marketing degree programs directly, leading a team of marketers, or you're just curious about big changes that might impact the programs you work with, it's important for you to stay up to date. So today we have 5 topics that I think are of specific importance. There are a lot of changes in targeting. Some of them not so great. We'll focus on the great things that are handy that we've been able to take advantage of recently. We'll also talk quite a bit about mobile page speed and AMP. Another thing that we can't resist the progress of time, and AI and machine learning are having a huge impact on the work that we are doing as marketers. We also have new attribution models and some changes in the world in terms of regulations and thoughts about data privacy that we need to keep in mind as we do our work as marketers or as just professionals in the higher ed space. So we'll start with enhanced targeting capabilities. So I have a team of marketers who are quite excited when we have progress, but I'll say we meet on a regular basis. We have a weekly meeting at which we often are discussing what the newest changes are in the platforms that we're using to market our clients' campaigns and programs. And those changes are happening all the time. So there are all of the major marketing platforms have introduced some kind of advancements in the last year or two. We'll talk about a handful that are of particular interest and that may shift how you approach targeting for your higher ed programs. The first one is kind of exciting for us. In our work with higher ed clients, we've had great experiences with LinkedIn. In fact, it drives our second best lead to enrollment ratio after Google paid search, which is amazing. You know, Google paid search is a high intent, typically attracts high intent traffic, people who are really looking for something when they go to engage. That's not necessarily the case with LinkedIn at the same level. But we certainly are seeing great lead to enrollment ratios. And the audience insights that we have access to in this platform are amazing, which is why we're excited to hear in October of last year that Bing announced they would allow advertisers to leverage LinkedIn profile data in their targeting for Bing search ads. It didn't come as a surprise. We've been kind of wondering what kinds of developments would come about following Microsoft's purchase of LinkedIn back in 2016. But this was a nice thing to see. So what that gives you access to is industry, job function, and company. You can now utilize these depending on your account. So this is getting rolled out steadily, as they often do in our marketing platforms. And actually, we have not seen it in any of our accounts as of yet. We're kind of eagerly awaiting this. But in your Bing search ads accounts, you can now access these kinds of targeting parameters to add to the targeting that you use for your Bing campaigns. One big caveat is that these targeting options don't narrow your audience. They allow you to add bid adjustments to help you emphasize or de-emphasize a particular group based on the insights data that you already have. So if you're running LinkedIn campaigns, you can start to see, well, what industries are performing better? What job functions are performing better? Do we have any that are not doing very well that we want to maybe de-emphasize in our marketing? And then you can apply those learnings inside of the Bing search ads campaigns. And this is something you set up in your settings and demographics tabs. If you do have access to this, that's where you want to go look for it. Unfortunately, you know, like I said, not everybody has it yet. So just keep an eye out. Another great targeting update that we have, and I say this as an update because there are developments happening in this space, and that's lookalike audiences. So this is a great tool for expanding your reach. Google, Facebook, both of these have a tool that does this. So in Google, it's called Similar Audience. In Facebook, it's called Lookalike Audience. We've been able to use these tools to create audiences on those platforms for quite a while now. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is. So a lookalike audience is basically a system-generated audience based on an audience that you upload. So let's say you have a retargeting audience of visitors to your websites and landing pages, and you upload that into Google or Facebook. Then you can create a lookalike audience based on that. So as long as it meets the minimum, so there are some minimum matches that have to be made, you can then reach a much broader audience that resembles your original audience. It's not just for retargeting. You could also upload a customer list. So let's say you have a quite large customer list of people who share characteristics that make somebody a good prospect for your programs. If you have a large enough list, you can upload that and then tell Facebook to create a list of people who are similar to that profile that you've uploaded. this is coming soon for LinkedIn, which is very exciting. According to our rep, this is happening sometime they're shooting for a Q2 launch of this, but as we know, with these kinds of developments, that might happen a bit later. And another development that's happened recently is in Google Ads, where we actually can utilize similar audiences for search ads now. So that was a new development as of, I believe, November of last year. Great tool. And this is how, so we talked through this. You're identifying your best customer segment, you're creating that lookalike audience, and then you're able to reach that new broadened audience to generate more volume. Okay, so then the next thing I'd like to talk about that is a recent addition to Google Ads audience targeting is custom intent audiences. So we at JMH and have really decreased our use of Google Display Network. So in the last 5 years, we decided that the quality of traffic we were getting from Google Display Network was not such that we wanted to continue investing large amounts of money in it. We pulled back to retargeting on Display Network only, and that was a result of some low converting traffic, but also some false leads. We were getting fake leads that were submitted that were obviously of no value to us. Well, Google has improved their targeting with regard to the Google Display Network, and they have some new options that are available and that I recommend you trying out. And one of those is custom intent audiences. So with these, you combine keywords, URLs, to create a targeted audience of users who are researching a topic or product. So they're similar to the in-market audiences that Google has been offering now for a couple of years, but they allow you to define exactly who it is you're looking for rather than picking from a short list defined by Google. Paired with demographic targeting, which is the last circle here, these audiences can drive great results. So if you've pulled back, apologies, little move there. If you've pulled back to just using Google Display Network for retargeting, I do recommend looking at this as an option, but it is important to be careful. That you can get some pretty large audiences, and our rep has recommended that you really focus in on some long tail keywords and very specific URLs to help Google develop an audience that is really pertinent to the programs that you're marketing. And last but not least, detailed demographics. So this is something that is another development in Google is pretty great for the higher ed space. So these are the kinds of things they've added. So this is just for paid search. You now have the opportunity to target. We've had parental status for quite a while now, but we have marital status, education, and homeownership status. Of course, education is of particular relevance for us. The sub options you have here, if you select that, is you can target those who are current college students or who have highest level of educational attainment of high school graduate, bachelor's degree, or advanced degree. The other great thing about this is you're not only able to just target these audiences, you can add these for observation, and you can exclude them or down or up bid them. So you can add some bid adjustments to control how you are reaching people who fall into these specific detailed demographics. So our next important topic is mobile page speed. I think we've been hearing quite a bit about mobile page speed over the last year, and this is kind of, we're in the future now. Mobile page speed is a significant factor in Google's mobile search engine results page as of July of 2018. So there was a change, and it is it is significant. If your website and landing pages are not mobile friendly, you are losing valuable rank in organic results, not to mention valuable interactions from paid traffic. According to BrightEdge, as of 2017, 57% of all US online traffic was coming from smartphones and tablets, and that has increased since then. And if you look at those numbers across the rest of the globe, we are seeing much higher numbers. So there are countries in which we've got numbers up to 80% of mobile, of all traffic, online traffic coming from mobile devices, and that's significant. So what does mobile friendly mean? So we talk about mobile friendly, and that can be confusing. So there are several factors involved, but page speed on mobile is a huge factor, and there are many ways to improve it. Google has a handy tool for checking your pages, and it includes details on how you can improve your performance. And specifically how many seconds you can shave off of your load time. It's a really great tool to use. I recommend it. I believe there's a link included in the playbook that you guys will receive, and that actually I think is already uploaded into the presentation. So I recommend you taking a look at that. Can provide some resources for you to hand off to your IT teams as needed. And we use both the mobile friendly test and the page speed test to evaluate how our clients' pages are performing with great results. So we're talking about how important mobile page speed is. As page load time goes from 1 to 3 seconds, the probability of bounce increases 32%. I guarantee most of our landing pages most higher ed landing pages, let me clarify, are landing in this second or third category. And in some cases, we've seen pages that are taking close to 10 seconds to launch. If you have paid for a click on an ad, which in some cases on Google paid search or LinkedIn can cost upwards of $15, you do not want that person bouncing before they have a chance to learn more about your programs and then inquire. This just to bring home the impact of mobile page speed. I think this is a great reminder. I look at it quite often as we're evaluating our priorities and making sure that we are getting into the new tools and new systems that allow us to have an impact on page speed. And one of those such tools is AMP. So accelerated mobile pages. It's probably something you've been hearing about. If you don't quite know much about it yet, this was an open source initiative led by Google. First appeared in 2016 and was initially designed for news publishers. So if you look on your iPhone or your Android device or whatever device you have, most of our mobile phones have a top stories section, and this is what that was designed for. So they were finding that people were clicking on those top stories and then they were bouncing. They were never actually waiting for the page to load with the story that they'd clicked on because it was taking too long. And so they worked to improve that. So this is the AMP really creates basically a text standard for creation of fast loading mobile pages. And that's been expanded since then. So you'll see there are AMP plugins for most content management systems, including WordPress and Drupal, which I know are probably the most common content management systems in use in higher ed today. And they've just released a beta tool in Unbounce, which is a landing page tool that we use for our clients in the JMH division. We're working on getting AMP pages created. It's a very simple process. You can use your existing landing pages in Unbounce and just copy them over and update and revise them slightly and be running with AMP in no time. So we are currently slated to have AMP versions of most of our pages launched in the next couple months. And I thought this was a nice number here. There was a 4-time decrease in mobile page load time for CNBC once they started running their AMP pages. And that's a huge impact. AI. So it's true, we live in the future now. I find myself saying this all the time. And it's impacting us at all levels in our lives, but especially as marketers who are working often in a digital space. And today I'd like to talk specifically about how AI is impacting our bidding strategies and our creative strategies. Uh, there are a lot of signals in the digital marketing space. So if we think about Google paid search, for instance, uh, there's there's a lot happening there now. So if you were to look in Google AdWords, of course now it's Google Ads, but if you know 10, 15 years ago, almost all of these green circles here didn't exist. So it was a list of keywords, and you bid on those keywords, and you had a list of ads that might be presented for those keywords, and that was about it. Keywords and ads. Now we have all kinds of signals. So we have individual user behavior, we have operating systems, we have browsers, we have interface language, ad characteristics. So that goes down to the kinds of ad extensions that you're using, whether you have them in place at all, the physical location of the searcher, the day and time, whether or not that person appears on a remarketing list. The location intent in their search, the device that they're using. And this is just a handful of them. And we have, in many cases, we have the opportunity now and the ability to add bid adjustments for these different signals. But my goodness, the amount of complexity in keeping up with that is just mounting. There's no way to keep up with it. And I'll be honest, we were hesitant to jump on the AI bandwagon. We felt like, we've been working in higher ed for 15 plus years, and we're pretty good at this paid search thing. But it became pretty obvious to my team that we could no longer account for the number of different signals at play, even with the consistent hands-on management that we employ. And no matter how many device, location, audience, or any other bid adjustments we added, it was becoming untenable. So along comes smart bidding. So typically, we were using an enhanced CPC kind of early on. So we would set a bid for a keyword or for an ad group, and we would adjust that bid. We would allow the system to adjust that bid just a little bit based on what kinds of signals the machine learning was seeing to help identify which search instances would result in the best performance. Well, along comes maximize conversions, target CPA, and target return on ad spend. So typically, target CPA or max conversions are going to be your best option. Given that calculating ROI is a bit more complex, you have to have a data exchange pulling your return on ad spend back into the system. So most higher ed advertisers are going to be looking at target CPA or max conversions. It's worth noting that Facebook has used smart bidding in its system for quite a while now. So this is kind of it's in its CPM model. This is something we've been utilizing there, but it's not as visual. It's not as easy to see on the surface and understand kind of the impact of it. We have been recommended, so we're learning about how best to utilize these tools, and our reps have recommended that we utilize max conversions in certain instances and target CPA in others, and it just depends on the details of your budget and your program and what your goals are. So it's important for you to look into that a little more deeply, but we recommend considering that for your campaigns. Responsive ads. So this is another way. So this on the creative end of things, we have options now in Google Paid Search, Google Display, and Facebook to utilize responsive ads. So on paid search, you have an explanation here. Responsive search ads adapt to show relevant messages to your customers. You provide the content, and we do the work to combine them into ads that improve your campaign's performance. So you give pieces of content to the system, and it organizes those together in ways and tests them, and then optimizes towards the ads that are performing the best. We are finding great results on Facebook with this approach. We're able to do that to incorporate testing around imagery, around ad copy, around headlines, all without spending our time doing intensive and complex A/B testing of copy. The system is doing it for us. I do urge you to be thoughtful about your approach to responsive ads. It's good to sort of plug and play to see what are some different iterations of your ads that might appear. And this is especially important in the higher ed space where we have, it's important that branding is consistent and that our messaging is accurate and inclusive. So test that out, see what kinds of different ad messages might appear based on the combination of your different fields, and go ahead and test this out. It's a huge time saver on Facebook and paid search, and we're seeing some great advancements in how these responsive ads are showing up in the Google Display Network as well. Next, we have attribution models. So we've talked about AI, we've talked about smart bidding and creative. Now we're talking about data and the quality of the data that you provide to the algorithms. How many of us are using attribution models of last click? I would say probably the majority of us. Now, if you have moved to a new attribution model, bravo, that's good. You're working with better data, and that's not the norm at this point. So most people are still operating in a last click environment. So this is what we had originally. We actually had a few options, though we were defaulting often to last click. We've got last click, we've got first click, and we've got linear. What these models do is they give credit, all of the credit, to one click. So for instance, in last click, we have all of the credit going to the click that happens right before a prospective student converts into a lead. In first click, it's the opposite. Whatever their first click is given all the credit, no matter how many engagements they have with our advertising after that point. Linear, that credit is spread across all of the interactions equally. So those models are not entirely accurate. They give us an oversimplified approach. And we have a couple new options available that we recommend shifting to. So position-based and time decay. Unlike our first three options here, these attribution models allow us to prioritize and give more or less value to each engagement along the funnel. So for instance, position-based, I'll give a scenario. If someone were to come to Google and search for online degree programs, let's say that your ad appears and they click on the ad, but they decide this may not be where they're headed and they don't become a lead, so they don't fill out that inquiry form. They come again maybe right after that or a couple days later and they say, you know, I'm not just interested in online degree programs. I actually need a degree completion program because I have some credits to transfer. So they do a search for online degree completion programs. And they see your ad again and they click on it, but it's not quite, they're not ready yet. Later, they come in and they say, you know what, actually I'm really interested in an online degree completion program in psychology. And they do that search. This time they click on your ad and they go ahead and they fill out that inquiry form. So they are now a lead in your system, and the Google system, the Google Ads system, will show that they have become a lead, and they will distribute credit across different searches differently. So their very first search will get 40% of the credit. Their very last search, so the online degree completion in psychology search, will get 40% of the credit. And any engagements or clicks that happen in between those two will share the remaining 20%. So I see this as valuable because if somebody does a search at the beginning of their kind of awareness journey and they see your ad and they click on it, they now have your brand in mind. It's there. That's a valuable interaction. Now, the interactions after that are also valuable. And of course, the one that happens that leads directly to them becoming a lead, we can agree is very valuable. But that first one I see is very important. Now, if you are in a situation where you have really strong brand awareness and those first kind of top of funnel searches maybe aren't as valuable to you because you're already there in people's minds, you might want to choose the time decay option, which emphasizes the more recent engagements that happen before someone becomes a lead. There are other things to consider, but I urge you to, if you are not using these new attribution models in your Google Ads system, I urge you to look at those and decide with your team where you should land. And this is not just specific to Google Ads. So this is a conversation that really should be happening across all of your lead sources. We at JMH are using Marketo marketing automation for some of our programs, and we're really finding the value in having a clearer, more accurate understanding of the different engagements that lead somebody to become a lead, and then push them down funnel to become an enrollment. And those are the kinds of conversations that we need to be happening. How do we make sure that we don't devalue those top of funnel searches and those early engagements with our content, with our websites, and that we understand the value that those present in our down funnel metrics. So, I talked about our existence in the future now. And I think in the last year, some of the things that are coming up, whether it's GDPR, ITP 2.0, which is something that probably a smaller group of you have heard about at this point. Those of you who are hands-on may have heard of this a little bit more in more detail. As far as even GDPR, ITP 2.0, and the Facebook data privacy concerns that people are having. So these are all indicators of a new space that we're in. GDPR, it was implemented on May 25th of last year, and it doesn't end there. It's probably something you've encountered and you've been affected by at your institution at many levels. California then went and passed its own version of this law shortly after the introduction of GDPR 2.0 in Europe. So I believe that goes into effect this year. And it's something that we need to be thinking about as marketers. People view data privacy in a different way now than they did just a few years ago. And the more responsive to that we are, the more successful we will be. There are very small ways that we can do that as marketing teams that have a big impact. So things like updating your privacy policy, making sure that people understand how they're being tracked and when they're being tracked, when cookies are at play. You've probably noticed as you're navigating around the internet that you have quite a few websites now that let you know front and center that there are cookies on that website. So let's consider how we in the higher ed space can adjust to that. We tend to move a little more slowly, but it's important for us to have those conversations and make sure that we are in keeping with some of the new regulations from a legal standpoint, but that we are also being responsive to the different ways that people think about data privacy. ITP 2.0, I'll go a little bit into the details there without getting too deep, but it's Apple's updated version of intelligent tracking prevention. So essentially what it does is it prevents tracking. It was released in September of 2018, and it's aimed at blocking the use of third-party tracking on the Safari browser. So this has an impact on traffic that's happening on the Safari browser on iPhones or on Apple desktop or laptop devices, as well as uh, the iPads. So this is something that you need to know about. It's about, I believe, Safari has about 17% of the market share for browsers. For our purposes, that means the cookies you use to track conversions and build retargeting lists on Google, Bing, Facebook, and LinkedIn, for instance, are probably not working if you are not using the newest versions of cookies that have been put out in compliance with this. So it's a chunk of conversions that you might be not tracking, and a chunk of people who may not be making it onto your retargeting lists. So something for you to look into. There's an easy way to go about mitigating that, and we recommend using Google Tag Manager for that. So if you have Google Tag Manager in place, that means that you are always using the newest tracking tags. There are a couple little settings that you have to pay attention to in order to use Google Tag Manager successfully to mitigate ITP 2.0. So do a quick Google search on that, and you'll find some resources around that. I find in general, as a marketer in this day and age, with the kinds of changes that are happening, not every year, but every month, this is a great tool to keep you from spending hours and having to reach out to your IT team every time there is a new tracking tag that's been released. So I really recommend looking into that and ensuring that you are compliant with the newest tag requirements and making sure that your tracking is accurate and up to date. So a lot of what we talked about today requires change, and it requires being responsive. We're talking about being responsive in the face of AI, in the face of shifts in public opinion about data privacy, and just technical shifts in terms of how we can target our audiences. These things are all changing at a pretty rapid pace, and we need to keep up with it. And that can be difficult in higher ed. It's a space that isn't designed for that, really. So as each year passes, more and more of your students grow up with this technology. So if you are still handling people's information like you were last year, or relying on tracking tags from last year to measure your marketing's effectiveness, you are not operating in this space as effectively as you can. You're losing prospective students who grew up in a digital world, and they have different expectations. But the nice thing about this is that we have a lot of change happening, but that doesn't mean that you abandon what makes you human. On the contrary, the changes I've shared today have the potential to let us be more human. Instead of spending hours creating audiences, A/B testing ad copy, and managing bids on thousands of keywords, we can allow the machines to do some of that heavy lifting. And that allows us to shift our attention to the quality of our creative, the real needs of our audience, and the true benefits of what we're selling in higher ed. And that's the value I see in this, and what I think you should take from today is how can we leverage these new tools, these new developments, and machine learning to help us be more effective as marketers and as humans. Okay.
Great, thank you very much, Jana. That was very informative. Hope everyone got a lot out of that. We do have a few minutes here for question and answer. So if you'd like to, there is a pod there that's called questions. You can type your question directly into that, and we'll be happy to answer those. There have been a few that have come in. I'm just going to go ahead and fire off one or two here, Jana, and we'll answer your question as they come in. If for some reason we're not able to get to those in the next 5 or 10 minutes, we will certainly either email you or get in touch with you in some way, or you can email us if you have questions that we're not able to cover here today. Okay, so the first question that we had, Jana, was about the attribution modeling, which you touched on the two that people are most likely to use. I'm sorry, that's the smart bidding question that you had, that I had notes on there. The attribution model, which model do you recommend? And what should be considered when deciding?
Yeah, so we typically go with the position-based attribution. So we really find in most cases that we are working in, it makes a lot of sense to better understand that top of funnel search, to better understand how are people starting to become aware of our clients and the programs they offer, and then what is driving them to take immediate action. So I tend to default to that, but kind of building on what I said earlier, I think if you're in a situation where you have a brand that is really well established, especially in the geo target in which you're marketing, that becomes that top of funnel search may not be as valuable. You may really want to focus in on what are the interactions that are happening kind of directly leading up to the final conversion action.
Okay, great. We've got another question here. In situations where display placements are showing one impression and one click, would you consider this as suspicious activity?
So if you're talking about kind of a one-to-one relationship in general, yes. So if I see higher volumes, kind of where I've got maybe 20 or 30 impressions on a particular placement, and then close to 100% click-through rate, absolutely, I see that as suspicious activity. And I often go through our placement reports and just go visit the sites, and you may not be surprised, depending on how hands-on you are with Google Display Network, but the types of things that I find are quite interesting. So there are a lot of fraudulent sites out there, and it's kind of hard work. Even using custom intent audiences, it's hard work to go through and exclude placements and keep up with that. One thing that is a good tip for if you're seeing this for apps in particular, which I do see a lot of, and we have seen, and just from a human perspective, and as a person who has a 3.5-year-old child who plays with my phone sometimes, I know how many accidental clicks there are on ads when you're in an app space. So I recommend, letting your ads go onto apps, and seeing if they perform well in some instances, but you can actually exclude all of the app categories if you are noticing that type of activity. So if you're seeing a lot of impressions with really unreasonably high click-through rates, I recommend going through. They just got rid of the ability to exclude all apps, which we used to be able to do. So now you have to go through and exclude each app category to get out of there kind of entirely.
Okay, next question. It says, thanks, Jana, great presentation. When you make bid adjustments for custom intent audiences or detailed demographics, how big of percentages do you usually use? Do you typically end up around 10%, or does it take 100% to move the needle?
Let's see, I'm trying to think of it depends on the situation, which I know is, not as helpful. So what I typically do is I will look at the the disparity in conversion rate and cost per conversion for a particular audience. So let's say I am observing. I have an observation audience set up for you know, people who are in a, let's just go back to kind of simple demographics, who are in a particular age range. And I am noticing that they are converting at half the percentage conversion rate as my other audiences, and they have a cost per conversion that's twice the amount, and maybe they're spending quite a bit. I might add a negative bid adjustment of 50% to that to try to pull that kind of back in line with where my other audiences are performing, and just to control cost. So I'm often somewhere between kind of a 20% bid adjustment and maybe 75% bid adjustment. You can do a negative bid adjustment of 100, and it depending on what type of factor you're looking at, and it will effectively exclude you from that particular audience. So that is relevant at certain times.
Okay, and the last question that we've got here is again about Google Display. We are experiencing problems with lead deactivation due to invalid contact information. What is the normal percentage of leads that come in via display to be deactivated?
So when you say deactivated, I'm assuming that that means internally in the CRM because the information is false, or the phone number maybe is disconnected, or it's not a real email address. And because we've pulled back so significantly on our use of Google Display Network, and we're really focused on retargeting, we don't get a lot of that these days. But I will say back when we were doing more Google Display Network retargeting, or sorry, targeting for kind of interest-based targeting, we saw, depending on the targeting, we would get more or less. So we were seeing a high percentage of false leads. So they were, in essence, kind of deactivated or not qualified actual leads coming in from Google Display Network for a particular client. In fact, I think they were in the program we were marketing for them was in the healthcare space, and we found out from our rep that there had been an upsurge in fraudulent website activity and click activity in the healthcare space specifically right around that time. So what I've heard is that in different topic targeting and industry targets, that goes up and down over time. So it's worth connecting with a rep and finding out, seeing if they can dig into that for you and pull out some of the targeting that seems to be leading to those false leads if you have that data.